Alright, I believe I'm streaming now. Hello, if this is your first time. My name is Chris. My channel's name is Comic Tropes, and I discuss comic books, comic book history, techniques by various creators, and sometimes, just for fun, I do a live stream. It's an opportunity to chat with viewers and just sort of sketch and sort of practice my inking techniques. Looks like some folks are filtering in. Let's see. Hello to Aaron and Voxel. Hello to Shale, S-Jam. Hello, David. Okay, bye to S-Jam. not the show for everyone, I guess. But everyone, bunch of people coming in. Wow, that's great. Last minute, didn't announce this early. Just sort of felt like drawing, so I was sketching a little bit, and then I was like, wait, I've got time, let's do a live stream, see what kind of questions people might have, and answer them as I can. I'm doing well, thank you, Adam. Hello to, let's see, Beowulf and Franco. Hello to Layla. It is 1 a.m. Oh my, wow, it is very late for you, sorry. Hello to Kono and Daniel, Black Orchid, Hubbard, Alfonso, Ghost, Let Me Be Honest, Aaron, Daniel. That's awesome. Hello, J. Andrew World. Wow. Well, I know it's late for plenty of folks. I know that, as I'm streaming this on the East Coast, very late, probably the middle of the night for most folks in Europe, but it's not super late on the West Coast. I'm doing this a little after 10 p.m. my time. And I don't know what to say. I was just in the mood. Nice to see a bunch of folks here. So, hello, Neith. And I'm just guessing, obviously, at how to pronounce some of these names. So, every year, there is an event by G.I. Joe content creators that they call Cobra Convergence, and it was started by a YouTuber named Hooded Cobra Commander 788, and basically there's just a theme, and anybody that wants to can sort of join in and contribute. This is the 4th year of that event, and I've contributed in years 2, 3, and now 4. I've got an episode coming up that will be about G.I. Joe, and let's see. There's a question here. Which mask do I prefer, the cloth one or the helmet? I think I slightly prefer the cloth one. It's creepier. It's creepier. They're both cool, but I like the cloth one a little more. Shale, with a very generous super chat, asks or says, let's see, love your content. You've helped me appreciate comics even more. Keep the videos coming. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. That is really, thank you. Thank you very much for telling me that, for sharing that. Thank you for the super chat. And, I love the medium of comics. I love what you can accomplish with it. So, I just love sharing that with people. I'm really glad that you get something out of it. So anyway, yeah. Where it's Cobra Convergence throughout this month, I figured, hey, if I'm going to do a live stream, or if I'm going to be drawing anything, it should be G.I. Joe centric. So that's sort of what I'm doing here, and we'll just see how this all goes. I don't have action figure reference right in front of me, so I'm sort of guessing on some of this stuff, but we'll see. I think that I'm getting the gist of it anyway. So, within a few weeks, I will have a slightly different setup when I'm doing my Comic Trope show, and that's because I'm actually moving. But it's a good thing for the show, because I think I'll be able to redo the sound quality. I think I'll be able to eliminate some of that persistent echo that happens right now. So we'll see. G.I. Joe versus Transformers versus He-Man. Well, He-Man can kind of beat everything with one punch, can't he? He's invincible, so no fight there. How did you lose your work if you were inking, J. Andrew? I don't understand. Was there like a flood or something terrible like that? I'm sorry to hear that. It's always frustrating to lose artwork, no matter what the situation. I'm really sorry. Or are you talking about sort of doing digital inking and your files crashed? Maybe something like that? It's just a guess. So what I'm drawing here specifically is it's a pretty silly character, all things considered. At one point, G.I. Joe's enemy Cobra designed robot troopers. I don't know why they'd even bother like with any human troops after that, but yeah, these were robots, and they were called B.A.T.s, which stood for Battle Android Trooper. Pretty crazy. Why do all mime have show or hide? Did I do something wrong? I don't get it. Is that a joke? Congrats on the move. Hope, love the intros. Well, thank you. How do you feel about those live-action G.I. Joe movies? They don't do much for me. I guess the second one, Retaliation, is like kind of entertaining. It's certainly, in my opinion, better than the first. But that's not saying a lot, is it? It wasn't really anything special, in my opinion. And you know what? Doing G.I. Joe in the modern era is tricky. When we made it, when it was at its peak popularity in the 80s, it was outselling stuff like X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman. G.I. Joe was ridiculously popular for a while. And the thing about it is it's like it was just a different era where we weren't I don't know, we had different enemies, we had a different outlook on life, and we were like raw military in a way that like just doesn't exist anymore. I think that we've just like had to face a lot more of the real world ever since 9/11, and yeah, it's tricky to find a way to make G.I. Joe work for modern audiences, especially younger kids. Another important factor with why it's tough to make G.I. Joe work is kids don't buy toys as much as they used to when I was young. When I was young, toys were really popular, and they're obviously just not as popular anymore. That's why we don't even have a dedicated toy store. We used to have a bunch. There was, KB, and there was Toys R Us. There was all sorts of toy stores when I was growing up. And now there's just like, a small toy section at places like Target or Walmart. But toys used to be way more popular. Now video games and streaming entertainment is way more popular. I would say that if Hasbro wanted to make G.I. Joe popular for today, launch it as like a game like a Call of Duty or an MMO type game with the G.I. Joe characters, and that would in turn interest people as sort of a platform, interest them in maybe some new action figures that could be like aimed at younger ages. Because you're always going to have the hardcore fans like me, but like I think if you want the G.I. Joe brand to live on into the next generation, you need to find a way to sort of like have it play towards kids. I think, and this is just my opinion, but I thought about it because I like G.I. Joe. I also think that if G.I. Joe was sort of an international group of like they recruit from the military, but they sort of operate a little bit more like spies. They have the jurisdiction to sort of go anywhere. That may be a little more palatable to people. Like the idea of sort of a group of spies with specialties might work. I mean, they operate like a military, but like, I don't know. G.I. Joe, it was always weird because so many of their adventures took place on domestic soil, and of course the military doesn't have jurisdiction to operate on domestic soil. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's see. Those pens are the best. These pens are very fun to ink with. These are just ink brushes, and it's very quick to ink with them. I wouldn't say you get the best line work, but you get a pretty decent line work, and they're very easy to work with so that you can just sort of do things quickly. Like this. I'm just planning on having fun, you know? They dry pretty quickly. They hold a line pretty well. It's not quite archival ink, so it will sort of... It doesn't give you the deepest possible black. It's a good black initially, but it will sort of fade with time. But I've said stuff like that plenty of times before. Favorite 80s cartoon, Inspector Gadget World. You know, as a kid, my favorite was Transformers. Big nut for Transformers as a kid. Some of my passion there has sort of dulled over the years. I liked the idea of Transformers a lot, but none of the the movies don't really do much for me. None of the cartoons really do anything for me, so I'm sort of left behind there. That's okay. I was also into G.I. Joe, and G.I. Joe I've sort of stayed with a little longer. I still kind of have a lot of love and passion for G.I. Joe for some reason. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's just that little bit more grounded. What happened to your glasses? I wear my glasses all the time, but it technically is for distance. So while I'm working in front of a computer or drawing, I don't always wear them. I guess I do for the most part on my live streams, but I don't need to. They're generally for more distance, so yeah. Also, I don't like my newest pair of glasses that I got in terms of like how they help my vision. They help my right eye, but not my left eye, and I've gotten it corrected. It was a little better. Still not great. I'm going to have to get new glasses again at some point. Let's see. Bumblebee was good. Somebody pointed out that Bumblebee was good, and I would agree that it's easily the best Transformers movie. But it didn't do that well, although I think some of that might be that people were burned out on the movies that we had been getting. So, don't know. But yeah, it didn't do that well, unfortunately, even though it was far superior, in my opinion, to the others. G.I. Joe was well written. Was Transformers? It depends on who you ask. I think Larry Hama did a great job, for the most part, on G.I. Joe, and still does to this day. As far as Transformers, you know, like, definitely an interesting concept, and I think that the cartoon had some pretty well-defined characters. The comic book didn't define the characters quite the same depth. Some people really like that one British writer that took over writing the American one. I can't even remember the writer's name off the top of my head. He-Man never appealed to me as a kid, so that's sort of something I went over my head. I know an okay amount about it, but I don't know that much about He-Man. I'm a little more amused by He-Man as an adult just because of how deliberately goofy it was. I would definitely say that, like, these days my favorite 80s property is G.I. Joe. As a kid, it was definitely Transformers. And I had a lot of both, but I did sell them all off before I moved out here to the West Coast. So, I don't have any of my childhood toys anymore, really. No, I can't think of any that I kept, and I also sold off like 99% of my comics when I moved. I still love comics. I never lost my passion for them. I just didn't feel like lugging around 30 long boxes anymore. Oh, look at that. That's very nice. Let's see. I cry during sex. Okay, that's your name. And thoughts on Far From Home, the Nick Fury setup? Yeah, you know what? I actually haven't really looked at like where the Rotten Tomatoes score is or anything. I was going to see Spider-Man no matter what because it's one of my favorite characters. I loved Far From Home. I had a blast. It definitely felt like Spider-Man to me. I had a great time. So I'm not sure what the consensus is on the reviews. I hope other people liked it as much as I did. I really had a great time at it. Totally worked for me. As far as like where they're setting things up next, it's a little hard to say. They might be doing something as simple as setting up Sword, which is sort of the piece of S.H.I.E.L.D. that monitors aliens and stuff. That could be a future element of the MCU, or maybe they're setting up something like the Skrull invasion storyline. I don't know. After seeing Captain Marvel, the Skrulls weren't really portrayed as overtly evil. The Kree are definitely the bigger jerks in that scenario, so I don't know. Let's see. I like the Dolph Lundgren movie with Frank Langella. Yeah, I can understand that. I remember seeing it as a kid. Do I have any Marvel Legends? I don't have any Marvel Legends. I do collect some of the Hot Toys for Marvel. So I've got some of the Hot Toys figures. Quite a few, actually. I probably have like about 40 or so. So that's one of the collections I have. And now that I'm moving into my new house, I'm planning on getting some glass shelves, and maybe someday I'll just sort of do a bonus video to show what I have there. I think that would be fun. Yeah. Let's see. First ever episode I watched was the Rob Liefeld Spicy Challenge. That's probably the one that the most people found me through. So that was like a very early episode that I made that apparently holds up okay, which is nice. I look back at some of my very first episodes, and honestly, I'm tempted sometimes to delete a lot of them. It's cringe-inducing. It's cringe-inducing sometimes. I think that some of my observations and critiques are good. It's just that, like, I didn't know how to make a YouTube show, so I was just winging everything in those first handful of episodes, and, I'm glad a few people seem to still enjoy them quite a bit, but I can't go back and watch them. But I don't really go back and watch any of my episodes, so I don't know. I just know that those were more awkward. What's up with the giant cheeseburger? Nothing. My fiance thought that was hilarious. It's what is it? I think it's a Halloween costume. And she just took off the straps and is planning to fill it with stuffing so that we have just a gigantic cheeseburger pillow. And she just leaves it hung up there in the meantime. It's funny. Let's see. Seems like they're going to invert the Squirrel invasion somehow. Yeah, that's possible. I could see the Kree somehow being the bad guys in that scenario. That's entirely possible. I don't know how they do it, but yeah, they might. You found me because of my ultimatum video. Well, that one did get a lot of views too, so yeah. And then like there's a handful of my videos that have gotten decent views. Nothing amazing, like nothing in the hundreds of thousands, but some of them are decently watched, and so yeah, there's like a small handful that people find their way to me through. Thank you for another super chat. I love Far From Home, loved the Mysterio illusion stuff. I agree. I thought that they handled that character great. I'm not going to go into any spoilers for folks that haven't seen it yet. I did enjoy it quite a bit. For whatever that's worth, I really did enjoy the movie Far From Home. But, you know what? Some people say that it didn't have the Spider-Man elements that they wanted. So there's a lot of mythology to Spider-Man. He's been around a long time. So I can understand that. Like it works for me, and I've been reading Spider-Man for a long time. But if it didn't have the elements that like somebody else wanted, I'm not gonna like be upset that they didn't like it as much as I liked it. But I liked it a lot. I had a great time. It was like in my like, you know, sort of top percentile of those MCU movies. Some of my favorites are like this just might give you an idea of where I fall. The first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Winter Soldier, I would say that, like, you know, Infinity War and Far From Home are some of mine that are at the very top. Yeah, I think Impossible Man's definitely the upcoming villain. No, I think that there's, I think that, like, Marvel's definitely giving some very, very serious thought to how to introduce the Fantastic Four. I think the Fantastic Four have a little more potential right now than even the X-Men, because there have been a lot of X-Men movies even up until this current year, so that's sort of fresh in a lot of people's minds before they want to reboot that. And Hugh Jackman played at least Wolverine. Fantastic. They got some really good actors there. But I think that what was I sort of going there? I lost my train of thought a little bit, sorry. I would say that yeah, I completely lost my train of thought. Sorry, folks. I don't even know what I was saying. I am a little tired. Okay. They'll announce a Phase 4 at SDCC. The timing is great. You know, I think that they might wait for the next Disney convention, though. Disney has, like, you know, a big annual event, and I think that they might wait for that. I think that they'll talk about some of the stuff that they've got upcoming, but I think that they'll go into serious detail at the Disney celebration, the D whatever number it is this year, 26 or 27. Who's my favorite Spider-Man villain? That's a fun question. I would say Dr. Octopus. I think Dr. Octopus is easily my favorite, my personal favorite Spider-Man villain. I think that he sort of represents best where Peter could go if he didn't have his, you know, moral code for, like, responsibility and stuff like that. I think that that's... Some people think it's like Green Goblin, but to me, like, Green Goblin is very interesting, but not as interesting as Dr. Octopus. I also think that, like, Dr. Octopus is more powerful. He's organized the Sinister Six. I think he's smarter. I think that Norman Osborn is a manipulator and a thief. Not necessarily a genius. And I think Dr. Octopus is a genius who's actually done some good things here and there because he is a doctor. So he sort of does have a small measure of, like, goodness within him. Personally, I really enjoyed the Superior Spider-Man story arc a lot. I found that interesting to examine Dr. Octopus on such a deep level. But your mileage may vary. Hey, I haven't used that phrase in a little while, have I? Your mileage may vary. I'm wondering if instead of, like, even having drawn in any ink, maybe I should just, like, draw purely in Copics sometime. I think that could be an interesting result without any hard borders. I mean, life doesn't give you hard borders, does it? If I look at this pen, especially across, like, a whitish background here, this doesn't have a black line outlining it. It gets a little bit of shade here, but if we really, like, look, there's also, like, you know, shading on the paper. There's, like, light reflecting here, a little less here, and, like, a darker edge here, like, but it blends, you know? So I love that comic books abstract the artwork and we draw things with, like, outlines, but that's just a technique, you know? That's an abstraction of life. Who is your favorite G.I. Joe character? Probably Snake Eyes. I think Snake Eyes is really interesting and well-defined, but I also appreciate that G.I. Joe is so big that we can take sort of breaks from Snake Eyes sometimes and, like, examine more grounded stuff. I'm a big fan of, Flint and Shipwreck, Lady J, Destro, Zartan. There's a lot of great villains in G.I. Joe. And Well, I'll go into it more soon, but I've got like an episode coming up, and it'll talk about how it's related to some of the comic books in more detail than you might expect. I think that there is still information out there that is not public knowledge about the development of certain characters, and I have some of that to go over. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, I know not everybody's too into G.I. Joe, especially these days. It's been a long time since it was a major property. But it's something I grew up with that I just always thought was cool. I can't explain it. It really interests me. Sometimes you get into something when you're young and it just stays with you. I'm sure that you all can think of something like that you're not necessarily too into now, but you might come back to it someday. It's something you grew up with. Do you believe in Jehovah? No, I don't. I'm a very skeptical person by nature. I don't really believe in anything supernatural or any particular religion. But if somebody else does, and it helps them through life, then it's working, I guess. It's just not for me. What do I think of RoboCop versus Terminator by Frank Miller? It's actually not bad. My favorite part of it is probably the Walt Simonson artwork. As a premise, it works as a comic book. I don't really take it as canon that that's what happened with the movie characters or anything close to that. But it is an interesting idea that works better than you might expect it to. And the artwork by Walt Simonson is really, really cool. So, who knows, maybe someday I'll discuss it. Excuse me, I've got a pop-up here. Yep. What's my fave Cobra Commander scheme? Oh, that's a fun question. Let's see. Yeah, Cobra Commander has come up with a lot of ridiculous plans over the years. I would say that my favorite might not even be fully a Cobra Commander scheme so much as I think he just gave it the go-ahead. It's when the Dreadnoks form the band Cold Slither so that they can have subliminal hypnotic messages in their rock and roll music. I just thought that was so cliche, but so funny too. It's when you really look at most of Cobra Commander's schemes, they're either created by Destro or Dr. Mindbender or the Crimson Twins, it's things like that. It's so funny. The Weather Machine, yeah. Do you think Superman Year 1 will be good? Maybe. Probably not. What are your thoughts on DC canceling Vertigo? It doesn't bother me too much in the sense that, to me, Vertigo was a great label, but it was a great label because it had an editor-in-chief that was running everything, and that was Karen Berger. Karen Berger made Vertigo what it was and kept that quality level high. Without her at the helm, there was the brand, but it wasn't really the same. It wasn't quite the... It doesn't mean that there weren't good things that came through it. It just was not the same imprint. So I'm okay with them shuttering Vertigo. It had a lot of good brand name recognition to it because it had a lot of great stories, but a lot of that is thanks to Karen Berger specifically. Thoughts on Sandman series for Netflix? I think it's a comic that can't be done justice on film. Even if they do a good job, it'll never be good enough. you could have a point there. I think that like certain pieces of literature suit certain mediums best, and Sandman definitely played with visuals and with the spoken word, and played with things that were surreal in a very unique way. It would create a very it would need an auteur to really be represented best in some form of film. Like maybe somebody like David Lynch could do it right, but would he be interested in doing something that was somebody else's idea? Like probably not. So yeah, I mean, I'll give it a chance. It could be good. It could be good, but it might always be best as a comic. It probably will be always best as a comic. Video on Akira? Yes, no question. I will do a video on Akira this year. The manga in Japan was set in 2019. It's 2019. The American translation says 2030, but to me it's set in 2019 because that's what the movie says too. It's 2019. So Katsuhiro Otomo intended for it to be set in 2019. I am going to Japan to record my Akira episode. I've booked the YouTube studio space in Japan. I think that's where I will record it. It's an interesting view. So yeah, I'm going to record an episode at the very end of the year about Akira, and I will be doing it in Japan. So I think that it'll just help me represent certain visuals, I hope. And if not, you'll get at least some interesting background visuals. So, I won't be in Osaka this time, unfortunately. I appreciate that, Rebel Leaf. I'm just going to be in Tokyo. It's a relatively short trip, only about a week or so. So anyway, what are my thoughts on the Batman plot synopsis starring Robert Pattinson? Haven't read any. Yeah, Akira is still one of the best anime films ever. Manuel says, I'll do you one better. I think it's one of the best animated movies, period. I'm not saying the best. There are a lot of great animated films out there, and a lot of them, I love a lot of Disney films. Even, like, especially, I should say, the early stuff. Like Snow White, yeah, maybe the story is a little kiddie or something. That animation's damn impressive for the year that they came up with it. It's very fluid. It's gorgeous stuff. It's very, it, like, really shows you, like, some impressive emotional like reactions and some interesting movement by animals and characters. I don't know. It really impresses me. But I would say that like the Akira movie is one of the best animated movies ever, hand or digital. It just looks gorgeous. It's so fluid. It's so easy to watch. It's fantastic. It's a great movie. Makes a lot more sense when you've read the manga. That said, there are like 6 big, thick hardcover, or not always hardcover, but there's 6 big volumes that collect all the Akira stories into like one overall narrative. Because it was a weekly story. Only about the first 2 volumes go towards what the movie's about, and then the movie sort of like comes up with its own ending. The manga has 4 more volumes of story there, with a lot more stuff happens. Akira himself is a character in it. Kaneda basically isn't in the 4th volume at all, and he's the main character of the movie. So if that's mostly what you know, it's amazing how much more story there is in the comics. Yes, I'll definitely look at Ninja Turtles again at some point. Absolutely. One of my favorite comics. Do you think we will ever get Miles Morales MCU? Well, I mean, I definitely do. What do you call it? Spider-Verse was a huge hit. So we'll get another animated movie with him there. And now that they know he's so popular, yeah, I think that there's a really good chance that he could end up in the MCU. I don't think he'll end up necessarily as a main character in the next Spider-Man movie, but they might introduce him. So, I think it's possible. J.J. Abrams doing Spider-Man? I think he's too big a name for something like Spider-Man at this point. I think he only wants to do his own stuff for the most part. The only thing I worry about is, Sony's had a lot of success with their Spider-Man stuff. Like, I didn't think Venom was very good, but it did very well. I thought that Into the Spider-Verse was very, very good. Fantastic, really. And that did well. So there's a chance, Sony may be like, okay, we did our 3 movies with Marvel. Now we're going to do our own Spider-Man movies again. They could, man. I don't think it would be a good move, but I could see them potentially trying. It'll all depend on who's in charge of Sony when that decision comes due. I really hope they're smart. We'll see. We'll see. Is Akira a good starting point for a newbie to manga Japanese comics? Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's self-contained. It's a really good story. It's by one of the best illustrator and writers out there. Is it the first thing I'd recommend? Not necessarily, but it's not a bad place at all to start. Personally, I like Naoki Urasawa. He's a relatively modern creator, and I would recommend the 8-volume Pluto as an entry point for somebody trying manga for the first time, or potentially Monster. I think that My Hero Academia is very easy to get into. So, a few things. Do you dance if you want to? Do you leave your friends behind? I don't leave my friends behind. Even if my friends don't dance, they're still friends of mine. Venom was fun. It sucked, but it was fun. Yeah, that's sort of a good way of putting it. It was kind of fun, but it also sucked. Have you ever seen Paprika? No. I'm aware of it. 100% aware. Haven't gotten around to seeing that one yet. I should. What would you say is the best place to start for a beginner on modern Batman comics? People will disagree with me. I'd say start with the Rebirth stuff written by Tom King. I think that's it doesn't rely on previous continuity. It starts fresh. I think it's pretty solid. I think that's a pretty good place to start. But if people wildly disagree with me on any of that, chime in with what you think is a better place to start. Because I liked Grant Morrison's run a lot, and at the same time, it really relies on a lot of Batman continuity. I think it's slightly impenetrable at times. Any thoughts on Pat Labor? I'm glad it's one of your favorites. I thought it was interesting designs, but the anime itself, I didn't think the quality of the animation was that good, so I had trouble getting into it. Do you draw comic books for a living? No, I have had work published, but I definitely do not do it for a living. Not that talented. Nothing I do is that in demand. As you can see, just by me getting distracted by talking to you all, I'm slow, I don't think I could do work fast enough. So, yeah. I love drawing. I love writing, maybe even a little bit more. So, we'll see. Maybe someday I'll put something out. Again. Sorry, I don't know who Yu Yu Hakusho is. Sorry about that. I read Death in the Family. Might go back, read the rest eventually. Yeah, you should. Thoughts on Mark Millar? His character work in Kick-Ass is borderline heinous at times. Kind of agree. I liked Mark Millar's work when I was younger. Doesn't really hold up for me. I find it very cynical. I think that that's a guy who's really lucked out by having some adaptations on film of his work that improve what he created in the comics, you know? I think, and he's had a lot of adaptations. I mean, we've got Kick-Ass, we've got Wanted, we've got Kingsman. Parts of Old Man Logan were certainly inspired by. The movie Logan had parts that were strongly inspired by Old Man Logan, and all of them are. I think the movies are all better than the comic. It's just me. You have a place in my graphic novel. That's very kind of you, J. Andrew World. I don't think I have time, obviously. Like, look, I'm too slow. Haven't read Silver Surfer Black. Junji Ito is nice. Yeah, I've reviewed Junji Ito's work before. The cool thing about reading some of his stuff is that a lot of it is short stories. So it's like reading an anthology that's a collection of short stories, but you can count on pretty much the same level of quality throughout. So that's kind of cool. If you like horror in comics, I would argue that Junji Ito might be the best. Just the best. But that's assuming you like a certain type of horror, which is basically body horror. He's got a lot of really gross things that happen to his characters. But it's disturbing. And he did an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that's quite a good read. Quite good. I never watched the show MASH. The song always sounded so sad to me that my sister and I, when we heard it go do 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 do, we'd like turn it off real fast. It just like really depressed us. We're like, ugh. I've heard that it's funny, but I never really watched it. That said, I'm drawing G.I. Joe. Larry Hama, who wrote the majority of like the comics about G.I. Joe, also did a little bit of acting, and he was sort of a featured extra, I guess is a good way to put it, on an episode of MASH. You can see him in all sorts of stuff. There's a really old SNL that he was in. There's a terrible movie, I want to say 1990. It's called The Ambulance, okay? And it's about, the main character is played by Eric Roberts, and supposedly he's a Marvel comic book artist, specifically for Marvel. And it's all about him trying to find this girl that he, like, just thought was really pretty, but he never really knew, and he saw her, like, abducted into a mysterious ambulance, and he spends the movie like trying to track her down with like a detective that doesn't believe him at all. Anyway, there are a couple scenes where he goes to the Marvel Comics bullpen and gets advice from Stan Lee himself, and Larry Hama also plays like one of the artists that works at Marvel. And so that was kind of funny to see him in that movie. It's not a good movie at all. The MASH song is for real called Suicide is Painless. I know, I learned that eventually, and I was like, God, that sounds accurate. In your opinion, is Scott Pilgrim's style over substance? No, not quite. I think that the style just adds to the intended humor of that comic. I think it's a great comic. No, I think it's still about something. I think it's about like growing up and maturing with relationships and responsibility, and it's just done in a pretty lighthearted style. But I don't think it's style over substance. No, not quite. The ambulance took your girl, true believer. This is Stan Lee telling you your girlfriend's been kidnapped by an evil ambulance. Are you gonna go find it, true believer? What do you think? Should I be the next Stan Lee now that he's gone? Should I just be Stan Lee? We'll just use some deepfake technology. Surprise! Surprise, true believers, I never really left ya. I am kind of excited for Ultimate Alliance 3. I might get that one. I don't know if I'll have time to play it, but I might. B-flat Stanley. No Jim Shooter. I'll do... yeah, Jim Shooter is not in the movie that I was just talking about, but I will do an episode about him sometime. I've definitely been thinking of all the sorts of things that I'd want to cover. It's there's a lot to say about Jim Shooter, you know? I mean, no matter what you feel about him, he's certainly accomplished a lot in comics. So, there's a lot to cover there, and you have to sort of find an angle and boil it down for a YouTube video. This is fun. I don't think I'll finish this, by the way. I'm just sort of doodling and talking to all of you. Jim Shooter's old blog was crazy interesting. I agree with that. I used to read that thing. It has all sorts of interesting behind-the-scenes stories. There's a lot you can learn from it. Yeah, I did an episode about Fantastic Four, and I had Stan Lee sit in with me. He was still alive at the time, so it wasn't really in bad taste or anything. Do you think if Mad continued to build a bullpen of up-and-coming creators instead of retreading 50-year-old ideas, they might still be publishing? No, because they did recruit a lot of amazing new talent. Like, they had people like, who am I thinking of? There's a really good cartoonist that I love. It's late, and so I'm just not thinking as quick as I do, like, in the morning or after I have something like some caffeine. Oh, Joey Allison Sayers, hilarious cartoonist. Her work was in Mad. They had Tony Moore do some stuff in there. They had some pretty modern creators work on Mad over the last several years. People just aren't responding to print as much. But, that said, I'll do something about Mad this coming week, so there's a little tidbit. The next episode will be about Mad. So, I'm deep in research mode about a very particular creator, and that's what I'll be discussing. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you guys. Mad meant a lot to me growing up. I thought Mad was hilarious. I also really liked Cracked, but I liked Mad the most. Mad was a great magazine. What they did changed the world. They did some really groundbreaking stuff, and I'm gonna miss it. I suspect at some point it may come back because it's a pretty well-known brand, but we'll see. Mort Drucker, he was good. Sergio Aragonés. So, like, my two favorite creators to have worked on Mad are definitely Sergio Aragonés. I've done an episode about him, and then Jack Davis, who someday I'll have to discuss. There were other creators that worked on Mad that I loved, or features that I loved, but those were my two favorite creators overall that, like, had extensive work in Mad, and I associate them with Mad. Whereas, for instance, Wally Wood was one of the first artists on Mad, and he stayed with them for a couple years. And fantastic illustrator, like one of the all-time best. But I don't really associate him with Mad per se. You know, it's just he's good, but not great. I haven't read any of the Riri Williams Ironheart stories, so I don't really have a strong opinion on there. Maybe someday I'll have to get around to reading that. What do you think of Guy Davis's work? Guy Davis, I really admire Guy Davis. Oh my God, his run on BPRD was so cool. I love Guy Davis. I've got some of his original sketchbooks somewhere. I need to pull those out. Now that I think of it, I might even have some original art from him, because I went through a big period of being like a massive fan of Guy Davis's work. I think he's so talented and kind of underrated. I don't think everybody knows who Guy Davis is, but he's fantastic. I met Jack Davis when I was 7 or 8. That is so cool. That is so cool. My friend Tony Moore is very influenced by Jack Davis specifically. If you ever look at Tony's art, you know, from Walking Dead, Ghost Rider, Punisher, like whatever, you know, the recent Thor stuff, you can tell that he's definitely strongly influenced by Jack Davis. And I wish there were more that were influenced in that same way, because I love Jack Davis's style of drawing. I love Tony's work. Yeah, big fan. Wish there was more of it. Is Tony Moore how you know Kirkman? No, I met them at the same time. I guess technically I did actually meet Kirkman first. I just sort of became, I would say, closer friends with Tony. That's all. Did you ever see the Jack Davis Georgia Bulldog work? That sounds familiar, but I'm not sure if I did or not. I think I heard about it, but I don't think I've seen it. So I can't claim to be the same level of Jack Davis fan as somebody like Tony Moore, or maybe even you, J. Andrew World. But I do very much admire his work. I think that he's incredible, or was incredible, maybe I should put, and we're just lucky to have such a huge body of work left behind. Hello, fat kid. What do you think about The Walking Dead's ending? Works for me, man. I'm biased, you know. I was a proofreader the entire run of Walking Dead, and you know, I was a long time to keep my mouth shut about stuff that was coming up in 6 months or whatever. That was a long time. So on some level, I'm a little glad that it wrapped up. I'm glad that it ended on Kirkman's terms. Like I say, I sort of have a biased take. I can sometimes, with older issues, I've sort of forgotten what was going on at the time, and I can like review them and have a little bit of a clear opinion. But in the moment, like right now, I'm too close to everything. I don't have I feel like my opinions are biased, and I'm just happy that it all went to plan. Let's see. Super generous donation here by CMY Comics. Just recently found your channel, and it has quickly become a favorite. Love all the quirky, weird history. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll keep doing it, I have no plans to stop anytime soon. It's after 2 a.m., so I should go to sleep. Good. All right. Good night, Layla. Thank you so much for stopping in. Have you ever heard of Australian artist Warwick Wong? No. Okay, let's see. If not, I recommend you check him out on Instagram. Okay. Warwick Wong. Yeah, sorry, not familiar. Not familiar. Could you do a review of the Alt Hero comic book? Doesn't really interest me. I don't think enough people read it to learn much from it. Nah, probably not. I was thrilled that Kirkman surprised people like that. Me too. Any chance of a look at Frank Miller's Batman work? Possibly, yeah. I should talk about some of Frank Miller's earlier work. Although, personally, I think I'd rather discuss his work on Daredevil sometime. That would probably mean a little bit more to me personally. But Batman is not a bad idea. An Arthur Adams episode, I will get to it. I have not read Dragon Ball. I know about Dragon Ball, but I've never seen the cartoon. I've never read anything about it. I don't know anything about it. Sorry. I'm not getting too far on this, so I think I'm just going to have some fun by dropping in some color. And I'll keep answering questions. So I was just trying to have fun tonight, like doodling and answering questions. And so I'll keep doing that. It's been going well. Thanks, Arthur. What is my personal definition of art? It's a very challenging question. I would say it's anything someone makes that is intended to provoke an emotional response. It's pretty broad, but I think the definition of art is pretty broad. Hopefully that makes sense. I missed a few things. Somebody pay Chris to finish the picture. Oh, it's too late. And it won't be that amazing no matter what. It's a doodle. I'm learning a few things. I'm practicing a few things. We'll see how it comes out. The bat is actually very colorful because he has this holographic piece on his chest. It's pretty wild. I love your channel. Thanks for being a deep nerd like me. No problem. I worked in a comic shop for a long time. My question is, what is your relationship with your local shops? Well, I've only lived out here for about 5 years, so I guess that's still a while. I've got 2 shops in the area, and the folks at my closest one, I think I've got a good relationship. Like, we know each other's name. If I come in and we talk, I don't go to the comic book store regularly. The other comic store, I know that the owner knows me because I'm pretty sure he's seen my show a few times. He's said hello when I come in. I don't think his employees know who I am, and I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go like, yeah, I've got a YouTube show about comic books. Like, they don't care. They've got work to do. So in terms of a relationship, it's like friendly, but that's about it. My closest one about like what's selling well and stuff. I'm always kind of curious. Like, what are people responding to here at your store? That's interesting to me. There's a lot of questions here. An episode about the differences between Frank Miller's Daredevil and the season 3 arc would be good. Yeah, maybe. Dark Horse Presents with the first appearance of The Mask. Yeah, I should probably talk about early Mask comics. They're a lot darker than people probably remember. Do you think art can be objectively bad, or are you more of an art is subjective kind of guy? I don't think you're ever going to hit a 100% consensus on something being bad. Some people will be amused by it on an ironic level, and who's to say that isn't valid? But Yeah, it's it's a stretch. I think that there's some stuff that comes damn close to being objectively bad, but I don't necessarily think there's an objective badness. I would say that it's objectively bad if it's intended to hurt someone and it does hurt someone or some people. So I guess that could be objectively bad. Yeah, I guess now that I'm thinking of it, there could be something, and you don't have to have a consensus. If it hurts someone intentionally, that's probably bad. At least if it attacks someone on a lower footing. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're doing a political cartoon about somebody powerful or somebody, like, rich and wealthy, that's fair game. They're in the public eye, you're making an observation about it. Even if you miss, that's fair game. But if you're attacking somebody like lower on the like, poor people or somebody that has a learning disability, things like that, if you're attacking them with your art and objectively like hurting them, then I would say, yeah, that's objectively bad. So I guess it is possible. It is possible. So many people hate Frank Quitely, but he's one of my favorites. I like Frank Quitely a lot, Rebel Leaf. I like him a lot. I think his work in All-Star Superman is fantastic. I totally love it. So, yeah, some people don't love it. I like his work. I liked his work in We 3 and so like Doom Patrol. He did some stuff. I loved his stuff in New X-Men. So I like his work actually quite a bit. Now, that said, style and personal preference is valid. So if somebody says that they don't like it because it looks weird to them, I'm not going to like try to change their mind most of the time. I'm just going to say, fine, everybody has their personal preferences. There's not much I can do about that. But yeah, I like Frank Quitely. What are some reasons you might consider art bad? I would consider art bad when it doesn't communicate effectively. So, for instance, if we're looking at, a comic book and it's really hard to tell what's going on, either the characters all look the same, or we don't get a good look at them, or there's no good establishing shots, I think that those are all examples of somebody failing on some level. Some people might like it more than I do, and so I'm not going to say it's bad, but I'm going to say it, in my opinion, it's bad. It doesn't work for me. So, yeah, I think that it's definitely like we have to have a scale, right? Like there can't be good if there's nothing bad. So I will sometimes talk about stuff that doesn't work for me. It doesn't mean it's the worst ever, is all I guess I can say. But there's plenty of art that's not so great. Do you feel as if modern Marvel's wokeness is to blame for its poor sales nowadays? No, not at all. I think that comics in general are having a really hard time selling. I think that, like, from the best-selling book to the worst-selling book, if we're only talking, like, between, like, a poor-selling title being at, like, 20,000 and a good-selling title being at 100,000, that is a really small margin for me. So I would not say that, like, any of those are, I think it's just people aren't reading print anymore, more than anything else. And I think that Marvel is simply trying to create characters that might appeal to new readers. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I really don't. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of good Marvel comics out there these days. But I'm not reading too many superhero books regularly myself, so I'm not always the best person to ask there. You know, I have my opinion, but it doesn't make it the right opinion. I don't read a lot of superhero stuff these days. I read what people are talking about, so that I can give an informed opinion. What do you think Japan is doing differently than the West to keep comics going? I think that they had a different look at comics from the beginning. Comics were made for all ages, women and men, from the beginning. So they've got all sorts of stories that will appeal to all sorts of different people. They also treat it as a bit more disposable, but what's popular will be collected into nicer collections. Like, you know, basically they'll print it on cheap newsprint. That means you can get a huge book every week that's cheap. It's inexpensive. You read it, hopefully you enjoyed it. Maybe you keep it, maybe you don't. But then, on top of that, if you really like it, your favorite thing will be collected in tankobon, just like we can read them here. So, I think it's just a cultural thing. So that's pretty cool that they've figured out a way to make it affordable for like pretty much anybody to read. Yeah, politics in comics is nothing new at all. I agree with that, DG, excuse me. Japan has a wider audience for sure. Yeah, a wider potential audience, because there's not really a stigma against reading comics in general. Maybe reading a certain type of comic, but not comics in general. I've been to Japan several times, and it's amazing. They really treat their creators with a lot of respect. You'll see comic book artwork as advertisements everywhere, and you just see like a wide variety of people reading different types of comics. It's nice. You do lots of topics hard to find elsewhere. Thanks, Travis. Quick question, can I ask who does your theme song? I hired someone to do it, but I don't remember their name. I'm sorry. It was a while back now. Sorry, I'm missing some of these questions. If people in the chat don't like wokeness, then check out Jawbreaker's God King. Never heard of it. What are some of your other nerdy hobbies you indulge? I don't have a lot of time because I'm doing this show and I've got a full-time job, so I don't have a lot of time to indulge in much else. If I do, I like building Lego. I find that relaxing. And I like I love going to the movies. I'm a big movie nerd. I watch all kinds of movies. All kinds. And then, what else? Is there anything else, like, nerdy that I do? It's like, you know, I draw, I read comics, I read books, the Lego thing. I don't really get toys, with the exception of I have an ongoing collection of Donatello variants. Like if there's a Donatello action figure out there, I try to just have all those. Just amuses me to try to do that. Creator rights in Japan. That would be an interesting one to discuss. It's very different over there. I will consider that. I will consider that strongly. Thank you. How overwhelming was it looking in comic book stores in Japan? Not overwhelming. And they carry comics in a lot of bookstores and certain ones in convenience stores. No, the interesting thing about their like some of their biggest comic book stores is they will carry something, and I'll mispronounce it, but it's called something like Dojin or something close to that, Dojin, and it that is basically fan-made comics, and some people will carry fan-made comics. They're a little looser about like people will even like make comics like fan comics about existing intellectual properties. And a lot of times, if it's done well, the companies won't crack down on them because they're only making a small amount of money, and that might be potential new talent that they want to like rope in. So they're sort of like they treat it as a type of training ground. They're open to the idea of like fan comics, so that they can sort of like pull the new talent, the best talent. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Let me take a quick look at like what other colors I'm supposed to be using on this bat. I don't remember off the top of my head. There we go. Bat. Thank you for introducing me to the Immortal Hulk. Yeah, you're welcome. Isn't it a fun, cool comic? I think it's great. I really think it's a great comic that's doing something a little different with Hulk. You do incremental differences with ongoing serialized superheroes. You know, you find like one sort of new angle, and you play into it, and I think that they're doing a good job with it. Did you lose any friends while recording the Sonic video? I didn't lose any friends. I definitely got what I kind of expected. I know that there's a hardcore fan base, and a lot of them were like mad at me for just not knowing the Sonic continuity. And I was like, but that is my point, is that the continuity is dense and impenetrable. I can't understand what's going on. Some people were a little mad at me for that. Oh well. Okay, here are the colors. Oh, a lot of green and a lot of yellow. Okay. Weird. What is it like to live in the hearts and minds of thousands of Earth's citizens? I'm not sure if that's about me or not. I don't think I have that big a following, at least not yet. Maybe I'll start thinking that way if I can cross 100,000 subscribers. I feel like that's a decent milestone. But until then, I'm kind of small potatoes in the YouTube world, but that's okay. I don't need to be the biggest. I just like doing what I do, and hopefully other people are into it too. But, you know, I was doing this when I had like a dozen views or 100 views, and I was putting in the same amount of work. I think I've, like, you know, refined how I deliver things, but I'm going to keep refining it. It's what I like to talk about no matter what, so as long as I'm getting a little bit of a response, I'll probably always do this. I like talking comics. I've got some ideas on like things I would love to do if the channel grew bigger, but I'll cross that bridge when it comes there, you know? Cross that bridge later. Stay humble, I'll try. Love your show, Chris. You've introduced me to a lot of cool stuff I never knew about. Keep up the great work. Oh, well, thank you for the compliment. Have I ever considered checking out the IDW Sonic comic? Not really. It doesn't really interest me too much. I liked playing the first 3 or so Sega games when I was younger, but, yeah, I'm not super into, Sonic, I guess. I don't know, I find Sonic kind of weird. I don't understand it, and I tried in that episode to sort of understand it, and I didn't really succeed. I don't quite get it, and like, I don't know. I probably will not see that live action movie, for instance. That doesn't appeal to me. It looks off-putting. But I liked Sonic when it was games, so I don't have anything against Sonic. I just don't get it. Did you already give your thoughts on Kirkman's sudden ending? I guess I didn't think it was that sudden, is all. You know, I sort of had a pretty good idea from years ago of what he wanted to do with it. I didn't know exactly when he was planning on wrapping it up or anything. I wouldn't have been surprised if he kept going to issue 400. I wouldn't have been surprised. But I also got where it made sense to me. William has a very generous super chat. Thank you, by the way. Thank you, sincerely. Mr. Tropes. That's me, Mr. Tropes. Hi there, I'm Mr. Tropes. Hey, everybody. Why don't we talk about tropes this week? All right. Will you ever cover any tropes, if there are any, of Alan Moore's writing? Jerusalem excluded, of course. That thing's huge. Well, I did do an Alan Moore episode about Marvel Man, or Miracle Man, whatever you want to call it. So I did do an episode quite a while back now. I very well could do another episode purely about his work at some point. But I did do one about him and what his tropes or techniques in his writing are, using one of his earlier works, because I think that it still is valid up to his more recent stuff. And, you know, like, Alan Moore is interesting enough that I could make episodes about pretty much everything he's created, you know? I could do an episode about his Swamp Thing, no problem. I loved it. You know, I could do an episode about just the stuff he wrote for Batman or Superman. I could do an episode about V for Vendetta easily. I love that story. Or From Hell. There's a lot to talk about with Alan Moore, so I very well may cover more of his stuff at some point in the future. But I did do one episode for now, and I want to cover as many different sort of creators and topics as I can, so I don't have a plan right now to do Alan Moore again in the near future. But it's definitely a prominent creator that I've considered covering more stuff by him at some point. I've definitely considered that. And sometimes I'll make tangential references to his work in other episodes, like if we talk about anything like Swamp Thing, or in the Brian Boland episode talking about, you know, The Killing Joke. You know, I'll talk about Alan Moore in that context. Mr. Comic D Tropes. Hey everybody, it's me, Comic Tropes. How about radiation in comics? We could talk about that. How about sometimes the colors look like lots of dots all jammed together back in the day? We could talk about that. I'm Mr. Tropes. Does Infotron ever embarrass you when you have company over? Yes, constantly. Maybe Skip Moore's Lost Girls. Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily have much to say about that one, but who knows? Who knows? All right, good night, J. Andrew World. Thanks for dropping in, even though it was really late for you. What should I check out if I like Basil Wolverton comics? I would say his early Mad stuff, his early work in Mad Magazine. Do you do any story writing? I have. You know, it's indie, small press stuff. Nothing too recent. Maybe someday. I've talked about it a couple times. I think that Kirkman finished it. I thought the ending worked for me. Some people don't love it. Some people think it's great. It works for me. I think he did a good job. I really do. And I'm gonna miss the comic though. I am. It's been around for a long time, and I've been with it since the beginning. I've been with it since before the beginning, when I saw, like, and I know I won't be able to share this. I always told Robert I wouldn't, but I've seen his pitches that were sort of zombie related before he did Walking Dead. He's got other stuff that he did with Tony. It's fascinating. It's really cool ideas. It didn't get picked up for various reasons. There's a lot, so I've been with him since before he did Walking Dead. It's great. Hoping he does a full Negan spin-off. He might. Never say never. What's your opinion on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Bought the first volume. Haven't really had time to read it yet. Need to read some more of that. We'll get there. I'm just trying to do some quick stuff with some grays just for fun. I'm sort of playing right now, I guess you could say. Let me grab something. Invincible Rocked. How excited are you for the finale of Paper Girls? Always excited to see, excuse me, a story wrapped up by, Brian K. Vaughan. I think he's just an amazing, amazing writer. Love his work. Personally, I'm a huge, huge fan of Brian K. Vaughan. Like, nothing he's done has ever, like, fell totally flat for me. I really, really like his work. Why The Last Man was great. I agree. I think it's such a solid story. I'm just sort of, like I said, playing. Like, this isn't exactly what I would consider finished art. It's just sort of trying to create an idea of where it would go if I kept working on it. That said, I don't think it looks too bad. What else do we have for questions? Just finished the ending of Stranger Things. Haven't finished season 3 yet. I'm only halfway through. Let's see. Have you ever read American Vampire? Yeah, I did. I considered covering it last year for my October run, because I wanted to see if I could cover a comic book by Stephen King, and it was like pretty much the only comic he's ever really written. But I don't know. I didn't love it. I liked the artwork. I liked the idea. I just didn't fall completely in love with the whole story. I guess I just didn't have like what I would consider like a solid take on the material to review and analyze it. But that's not to say that I wouldn't cover it in the future. Like I do have some opinions on it. What is the best video game? Ooh. The best. My best is probably going to be different from your best. My best would possibly be Tetris would be up there in the running. Also, Ocarina of Time, Zelda Ocarina of Time is one of my favorites. Grand Theft Auto, I really like. Boy, it's a tough question. This is kind of fun to just try to work faster with just colors, actually. So bear with me. I'm kind of having fun all of a sudden. More fun than I expected to. I love this boy's soft arms. Okay. Okay. I don't get that. I'm trying to figure out what was just said. I love this boy's soft arms. I don't get it. Okay, I missed some questions. I'm sorry, I'm zoning out a little. What would you say to someone who is only 15 but is wanting to break into horror comic and action comic writing and artistry? I mean, my friend Nate Bellegarde was definitely talented enough, I think, when he was age 15 to break in, so I think it's doable. I would just say that, like, be humble, and just, when you're young, you want to just sort of develop your own style and everything, and that is important. But in the scheme of things, so is learning to draw from life, so that you can draw really a bit of everything. And all I can say is, keep practicing on your fundamentals. Make sure that you can literally draw, if the story calls for it, that you can draw a 2016 Honda Civic, that you can draw that Civic flipping up in the air. Make sure that you can draw two people. Every story at some point is going to have two people, either walking and talking or sitting and a couch and a chair talking. Make sure that you can make believable and interesting people talking scenes. That's the challenge. I want to send some fan art. Where do I send it? I say it in every episode. comictropes@gmail.com. Never changed. Where'd I put it? Okay. Whoa, thank you, William. Thank you for introducing me to Brat Pack. What a dark, mean little tale that both infuriated me and left me intrigued. That is such a great way of putting it, because I agree. When I read that, I was like, that was so mean-spirited in a way, but it sticks with you, and so, in my opinion, and you keep thinking, well, what was he trying to say? Because it was so mean, and then you're like, you know what? It's a commentary on comic book history, comic books themselves, and when you start digging into that, you're like, all right, thank you, Rick Veitch, for making a statement that was something I could think about. It's not to say that he's definitely right about everything, but he has a point, I think, and it's interesting. Weird comic, cool comic, in my opinion. Thank you very much for the donation. Thank you for sharing your opinion. That's brave to share an opinion, especially these days on the internet. People will crucify you if they strongly disagree. What are your thoughts on Squirrel Girl? I think Squirrel Girl is funny. Oh man, I think Squirrel Girl is very funny, and I met Erica Henderson, who's drawn most of those stories, and damn is she talented. She really, like, impresses me. Like, I think she is so talented. I don't know if anybody follows her on, like, Instagram or something, but, like, whatever she watches, like, she starts drawing. She just, like, I wish I had, like, her skill for just, like, strapping on a pen and throwing out something cool. I love her stuff that she's did about, like, Deep Space Nine when she was watching that. So cool. So I think you get the gist of what I was going for with this guy, hopefully. Did Wolverine take... No, come on. I don't think that's true. I don't want that color. 4, 5, 6. Sorry, I'm counting out colors. I love working with these things. Copics. They are a blast. I guess that'll do for this guy. Oh, I saw the weirdest movie recently. Boy, how do I even describe it? I think it may have actually been a little influenced by Akira. It's called Tetsuo the Iron Man. Totally surreal movie. Kind of horror, but only in the same way that something like David Lynch's Eraserhead is horror. It's disturbing. Man, it is kind of gory and stuff, so I don't know if I recommend it to everybody, but it is some weird stuff. Yeah, if you just want to, if you're into like film and you just want to see something totally different, then maybe check it out, but otherwise, like, it's not for everyone. That's all I can say. It's definitely not for everyone. Alright. I think that is a decent sort of sketch for the night. You know what? I look at it, though, and it's not quite... I made one leg way too thick compared to the other one, and it just doesn't feel right. Tetsuo, yeah. Do you like pina coladas? Sure. If that's what's available, then I like pina coladas. Is that a little better? Alright. Yeah, whatever. It was never going to be perfect, I guess. But I had fun doing this. I had fun answering all y'all's questions. Sincerely appreciate the participation. wouldn't have been fun without everybody here. Would have just been me quietly pecking away at something. It's much more fun to do it with people. Just trying to put away some pens and having a hard time with it. Why? There, okay. Is there something darker? What am I missing? I would say I'm missing a little bit of depth. A little bit of depth. Okay. I don't know. Just felt that I needed to do it. I think that'll do it for tonight, folks. Since I've got your attention, though, please consider looking for Cobra Convergence 4, CCIV, and you're going to see some amazing videos every single day this month. Every single day there's something cool being shared. And I've got one coming up in a couple weeks. I think it's pretty cool. Even if you don't like G.I. Joe, it's interesting as a comic book reader. Oh, wow, thank you. I've got another super chat here. Greg says, this is a bribe to get you to do a Preacher episode before the final season of the series, especially Fabry's covers and Ennis's tropes. So, like I said earlier, I don't love my early episodes, but my second episode ever, I did discuss Preacher. It's not an in-depth look at, like, the whole Preacher story, but it is a look at Ennis's tropes. It's okay. I think I could do better. I don't have TV. I can't afford like cable right now, so I have not been able to see anything other than season 1 of Preacher. So I'm not in a position where I could really do a comparison episode. That's not something I could do. You know, like compare the TV show to the comic. But I would be interested in doing that at some point. I think that would be the angle I'd want to take if I discussed it at some point. So I appreciate that suggestion. I'll think about a way I could discuss it. Amazon Prime has Preacher? Oh, if that's the case, then maybe I can catch up. I'll look into that. Thank you for the tip. I will be nice to Mr. Infotron and a Mike Zeck video this year. Maybe. I discussed Mike Zeck a fair amount when I discuss why I love Craven's Last Hunt, if you want to hear me talk a little bit about him there. But I could do a Mike Zeck specific episode someday. I am a fan. I'm a big fan of Mike Zeck. Hello from Peru. I would love to visit Peru. Personally, it's one of my goals to definitely visit Machu Picchu someday. So hopefully I get to visit your amazing country someday in the near future. Thank you all for the questions and the support. Thank you for the super chats. Very much appreciated. And I'm going to call it a night. I do have work tomorrow, but it was fun getting to chat with all of you. Thank you all for staying up so late and coming in for an unannounced video. I had a good time. Take care, everybody. Keep reading comments.